being that I do workshops with the Moth and with organizations around the world. So I'm just going to jump into like the ways that you, as people who are committed to health, health access, health equity, how you can start to share your stories, what you can actually do once you own them, and then how to actually continue looking at taking any moment from your life, any experience from your life, and being able to distill it into some type of a story. So I'm actually going to start off with some prompts. So I hope that that your fingers are ready to be typing and to light up the box a little bit, because I'm going to ask you about a moment. I want you to share with me, not a story, not a memoir, just a moment that you will never forget. So think about it for a quick second. It can be a small moment, you know, the moment that I realized that I really actually did like small dogs. You know, I always thought that I liked big dogs. It could be like a medium moment, the moment that I realized that my health was at risk, or it could be like a large moment. Moment I never forget is the day that I gave birth to my first child, or the day that I lost a loved one, right? So go ahead and just put in the chat, just like a moment. It could be health related, it doesn't have to be, but we're just gonna start playing around with what happens to people's minds, soul, energy when we start bringing up experiences and how to transform those into stories. The moment I became homeless in New York City. Wow. And I can imagine that that was like probably either the beginning of a lot of change in your life, or it was kind of the end of a lot of stuff. So so yeah, that's a powerful moment, definitely a powerful moment. What else we got here? And what I'm doing is you're going to see how these moments tie into your larger narrative or your smaller narrative. The moment I realized I officially moved to New York City. Oh, so maybe you had moved before, but this is the moment that you were just like, all right, I'm here.
Here I am.
Here you are. T. Richard, I hope my mother dies before me. Deep, 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 deep moment. Yes. The passing of my brother, from Teresa L. What else we got here? The day I diagnosed with Hep 1999. Oh, Hep C. Okay, 1999. December, when I got the right to vote restored. Whew, powerful moment. Moment I realized I was in love for the first time. Oh, my heart, my heart. Are you gonna make me all cry? Don't. Not yet. Give me like another 45 minutes, okay? Moment in Vancouver, in the Vancouver World AIDS Conference in 1996, moment when I realized that people with HIV in the US and Europe had access to antiretroviral meds, and nobody in Costa Rica had even heard about them. Ooh. I had found a message delivered back home after the conference. Wonderful. I mean, and upon reflection, it's wonderful. I'm sure in the moment that these were really trying, hard, difficult times, right? The moment I knew my job, my job was ruining my health. Yes, Grace, yes, I feel you. So you guys can keep on putting those in the chat. What I'm gonna do for you is I'm gonna bring up to the screen what we call in storytelling narrative arc or narrative structure. And this is kind of like the foundation of any moment that you have in terms of actually building it out to a story. And then I'm gonna show you a sample story, just a 5-minute sample story in terms of like how one of the people who has gone through the longer version of this training, how they're able to apply this to a story. So the moment I saw a man crying, carrying his sick wife on his back in India. Yes, yes, indeed. I've been to India a couple of times. Amazing, amazing country. And also similar to the United States, lots of complications also. You know, I know it's a huge subcontinent. There's a lot of health issues that that are going on all over the world. But I'm definitely feeling y'all. Okay, so let me see if I can share my screen. There we go. And let me see if I can find the right tab. Looks like they kind of switched things around a little bit on Zoom. Here we go. Do you all see my screen? No, not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, I see it, but it's black. It says Dawn is sharing your screen.
Oh, okay, it says sharing is paused. Bring your shared window to the front. Okay, give me 1 second. Shared window. Okay, do you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is narrative arc, narrative structure. Whenever you think about like your favorite movie, your favorite book, your favorite novel, all of them have a pattern. All of them have a pattern that basically tug at your emotions, which is what great stories do, which makes them memorable. And the reasons why stories are so powerful are because we're not necessarily telling people what to do or what to say or what to believe. You're just kind of sharing a moment from your life, right? But what happens is a lot of times in our lives, we have these moments that come to us, but we're not exactly sure how do we fit this into something that makes sense as a story, right? So, for example, somebody mentioned, I'm going to use the example of the person in India who had to carry their mother on their back. I can't see the quote, but I believe that was what the moment was.
Sick wife.
I'm sorry?
So it says, the moment I saw a man carrying his sick wife on his back in India.
Okay, the moment I saw a man carrying a sick wife on his back in India. Okay, great. So what happens with storytelling in the mind is basically like we remember things that are divergent from the norm. If you saw this person carrying the sick woman on his back every single day, it may not necessarily have stuck with you, but because it was probably a different day or a different moment, it kind of like sticks into your memory, right? So imagine you're trying to figure out like what is well, A, how do I tell the story, and B, what's the significance of this particular moment? I'm going to walk you through narrative arc, and you're kind of seeing how your stories kind of connect to any podcast, book, movie, anything else that you've ever seen that uses story structure. And so the way it works is the beginning, and we call these beats. So the beginning is like your first beat of your story, which is basically the setup. So in the beginning, life was like this. I used to walk to the store every single day, get my bagel, and talk to the local people in the corner in New Delhi, right? Basic information that you kind of need in order for the rest of the story to make sense, okay? Keep it short, sweet, concise. The second beat is what's called the inciting incident. And the inciting incident is when something happens in your story that kind of sets the rest of the story into motion. So if you all might know about like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, for example, classic fable, fairy tale, I should say, there's a moment where a tornado comes down, and the tornado is like kind of like the first impetus that launches Dorothy into a land that she's now lost. She's now lost in like this la la land. But the tornado has to happen in order for her to go on this journey to get lost. So if you've ever heard, like, for example, of the hero's journey, this is like the beginning of the hero, you in the story being the protagonist, you being lost, you getting complicated, you getting into like a bunch of mess, which leads us to like the third part of the story, which is called the raising of the stakes. The raising of the stakes is when you, the protagonist, are trying to get out of the mess that you're in. You're trying one thing, it doesn't work. You try something else, it doesn't work. You try something else, it doesn't work, right? This is kind of like the meat and potatoes of you being in some type of crisis mode. You trying to actually figure out how to get out of the mess that I'm in. Until finally you reach like this climax, this aha moment, the Oprah Winfrey aha moment with Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. It's like the moment that she beats up the witch, you know. In a lot of rom-coms, it's like the moment where like the guy gets the guy, the girl gets the girl, the guy gets the girl, whatever, right? And then it leads directly into like your resolution / conclusion, which is kind of like the fifth beat. And that's typically when you'll hear people say like, and the moral of my story is, you know, and that's when I realized that blah, 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 right? So if you take this moment when you're in India and you see that there's a man that's carrying his wife on his back. Typically the moments that we're thinking about, they're typically either somewhere here at the beginning, like the inciting incident, like that's when I started realizing that I needed to get more into health advocacy. But the more I got into it, the more I realized it was hard because there wasn't any access to services, right? So typically it's the inciting incident. It might be somewhere here in the middle, or it's the climax. It's the climax of your story. So you as a storyteller and somebody who's like trying to share a message, it's up to you to craft what is the essential information that you need before this moment. What is the essential information that you need after this moment? So let me see, did I include? Let me go back. Okay. So essentially what you want to do is you want to think about what is the significance? What is the significance of this particular moment? So I'm going to stop sharing for just a quick second here. Go back to you all. If I were to ask you the significance of your moment, we're going to break this down into one of three ways. So for everybody who has already commented, there's a couple here that I didn't see from before. The moment I went from HIV provider to a client, excellent. The day I was told I was HIV positive, excellent. Okay, so we have this moment, right? We've seen what the structure looks like. I want you to think about your moment in three different ways. I want you to think about, how did this moment or this event change me personally? What changed in me personally? So in my example, I often use a story that I share, actually the story that I shared at TED, which was about a moment that I got hurt at UCLA. I wanted to be an Olympian. And in a twist of fate, my twin brother is coming to run at the Special Olympics at UCLA. And when I reflected on this moment and the significance, the first thing that I thought about was, how did this change me? So it changed me because I realized that I needed to be a better sport. I was not showing good sportsmanship because I was so obsessed with winning. And so from this moment, I realized that I had to think differently. I personally had to think differently about what it meant to win. That was a change I needed to make in myself. Okay. The second way, oops, I'm getting some type of feedback. Okay, there we go. The second way I want you to think about is, how does this change your external relationships? So the first one is the self. The second one is your external relationships. So this exact same moment that I was thinking about, this moment at UCLA with my twin brother coming and running the Special Olympics, it changed my relationship with him, because I always kind of saw myself as like the twin that needed to help out my twin brother who has special needs. But I started seeing that he was actually teaching me a lot, and our dynamic and our relationship changed. And so I framed the story around what our relationship was like before this moment, and then what our relationship was like at the end. So that's a change in our relationship, external. The third way that I want you to think about is, how might this have changed your worldview? So things that are like out and beyond your control. So once again, the moment had not changed in my life. My understanding of it changed in terms of my worldview, because I wanted people to think differently about those who have special needs. And instead of thinking about them just in terms of needs, I wanted people to think about what people with special needs have in terms of their gifts. Okay, so in order to frame the story, I needed to first kind of like set up, not necessarily like what I thought about special needs, but I needed to kind of like hint that at the end of the story, I had a different worldview about the Special Olympics. I had a different worldview about special needs versus special gifts. But keep in mind that nothing has changed. Nothing has changed from that moment. Just my interpretation of it has changed. Okay. So what I'd like for you to do is choose a way. Choose one of these ways that this moment that you're thinking about has been significant. What was a change for you? Jump back over here to the box. What was the change for you? What shifted, or what did you learn? Did you learn something personally? Did you learn something about your relationship with somebody else? Or did you learn something um, about like a social movement or a political ideology or a philosophy? What did you learn, or what changed for you as a result of this moment? And keep in mind that there's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. We're just kind of like doing like a little bit of a jogging of the brain. Like, how did this change? How did this change you? So let's see. Emily mentioned that I realized my world had been very, very small. Great. Teresa L mentioned, I learned how fragile life is and how many of us, including myself at the time, took it for granted. Excellent. Deb from KFTC says, as a regular blood donor, I wondered how many recipients had my blood infected, had your blood infected. Wow. Wow. What else we got here? Richard Stern says, it made me realize that my work in counseling people about dealing with death from from AIDS, was no longer appropriate. To make a long story short, I needed to support them in organizing for access to treatment that created a whole new career for me, which lasted the next 20 more years. Significant moment, because wow, that really put into motion a huge change in your life. Things I had read about was actually happening in front of me. And that moment I had the power to affect it. Wow. Excellent, excellent. Grace, I learned about the layers of power dynamics, and it changed my approach to speaking truth to power. Speaking truth to power, yes. Richard Stern says, age was the correct term in those days. Apologies. Oh, no worries, no problem. Jason Walker said, so I became homeless due to parents' homophobia. And I learned that homophobia can at time be greater than a parent's love. Wow, wow. T. Richard, I learned that people you think are fragile can be extremely strong. Amazing, amazing. So I'm going to use this example here from Jason Walker. So I became homeless due to my parents' homophobia. And I learned that homophobia at times can be greater than a parent's love, right? Really hard to be able to digest that, right? But in order for the story now to make sense, we know what we need at the beginning, right? We need a little bit of information about Jason, your parents, your relationship to your parents. And I'm curious, I'm curious to ask, like, what your relationship was like, what your relationship to your parents was like prior to you mentioning your status, your LGBTQI status, versus later, and or like what you thought your parents were how they were going to respond, and how they responded after, right? So oops. Let's see here. So once you have like kind of like where the story is going, we have this kernel of a moment that like is like sentimental, it's deep. It's up to us to now kind of like connect the dots. Have you all heard of a through line? Yeah. So a through line is essentially going to help you connect, like, the small moments, like the setup of the story, to the what you're thinking about, like, if this is the inciting incident, or if this is the how, or this is going into the conclusion, right? It's going to help you connect all the dots from like the beginning of the story to the moments, and then to your conclusion, which are like kind of like these three kind of like main chunks that you need for a story really to make sense, right? So let's see here. Let me go back to the comments. So yeah, if you want to share with me what Jason, if you're open to being a little bit of a guinea pig here, what your relationship was like with your parents prior, and what was like afterwards, because you have your takeaway.
Yeah. So in relation to the story about me becoming homeless in New York, that was due to a person's parent, another person's parent who I was staying with at the time. So it
Got
wasn't
it.
really my parent. It was
Okay.
their parent who like threatened to kill him. Like I experienced like homophobia within my family,
Hmm.
but never to a place where it was like, it was always, okay, we don't want to see it. But it was never to a place like, oh, we won't kill you. So like for me, I like experienced like, okay, cool. Now I can see like how some people can like have families where their homophobia could be greater than like the love sometimes. And like, so that I guess for me, that's not really my story, but it's a part of my experience that helped shape my worldview, that I think got me more involved in LGBT, like youth homelessness, activism and stuff. Because
Got
like,
it. Got it.
so important.
And so were you expecting this kind of response from your friend's parents?
Because no, and not at all. Not at all. It was a shock to me. And like he told me what his father said in Spanish. He said, "I'm gonna get a gun and I'm gonna shoot you both." And I looked at him like, "Your father serious? Like you know your father better than I do. So like, is your father serious?"
Hmm.
He started packing his bags, and then I was like, oh, "Okay, cool. So this is real." So I had to quickly leave because like I know if my family said that, I'd be like, "Child, they ain't getting no gun." Like, but I like like, I know, but like some people, like when I saw him make a movement out of the place for that, I was like, okay, cool. He knows his father's rage more than I do. So like I know that some folks experience rage in their families in ways that I haven't.
Right.
So like for me, it kind of like helped me my worldview of like what does it look like to show like support in housing and like support for like LGBTQ folks.
Right. So that
Towards
was your personal shift in terms of like what you learned about yourself.
yes, yes, yeah.
And so now tell us a little bit more about so that's one perspective that you could have used to frame the story. Now tell us about your relationship either with your own family or maybe with this person that you were um, involved with, or this other person's family. How did your relationship with them change?
Yeah, so with my family, like now my family, because I like was queer and wanted to like explore and understand what it meant to be like a Black queer person in this world, I knew I could not find like support from my family because we didn't have any Black queer folks. If they were like closeted or like somewhere like we didn't talk about it. So
Hmm.
what that meant was that like I didn't go home a lot. Not necessarily, that was by choice, right? So it wasn't necessarily a thing for me where I was like, okay, cool, my family didn't accept me. I made the choice to like, okay, cool, I'm going to be around Black queer folks, in particular to like experience what does it mean to be a Black queer man in this world.
Got it. Got it. And then so you have like basically like a whole bunch of different relationships that you're trying to navigate as this is like unfolding.
Yes.
And then did it change anything in terms of like your worldview? Did you become more active in the movement, or did it change what you thought about homophobia in general? Like, how did it change your worldview?
I think like it changed my worldview about like my capacity to like my capacity to love another man. Like I didn't think I could have the capacity to love gay men. I thought it was something that couldn't only be done in private, not something that could ever be done in public. So like I'm like, okay, cool, this is something that can be done in public and should be done in public. So there was that piece around that. And yeah, I think like one of the things that I learned is that like many of us do come from like experiences of childhood trauma and like this like one trying to like reclaim or identify whichever like our femininity in the ways in which we want to show up in the world, and like there's
Right.
trauma and there's like ways to try to like either like hurt that, harm that, exploit that, or like silence that in ways.
Mm.
So like I learned about like the expression of like my femininity in ways in a safe space around kind of like trans folks, queer folks in particular about like there's a space for that's found, and that's beautiful. So yeah, so like that's really still tough today still for my family to like see my femininity, right? It's really tough, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's a challenge still. I think like, but for community, I think like it's embraced in ways and celebrated. Not even just embraced, it's celebrated, it's honored, it's elevated in ways.
Right. Excellent. Thank you for letting me use you for a quick second there as a guinea pig. But basically what you see is that like any one moment from our lives can be interpreted in a million different ways. There are a million different interpretations and different meanings. And sometimes even the meaning of something might change as we get older in age. You know, one thing might be like the worst thing ever today. The worst thing ever was the fact that I got laid off from my job. And then like, you know, a couple of months down the line, a year down the line, it could have been like the best thing ever because it led me into the path of like actually starting my own business and being free and not having to deal with the man, right? So there's a bunch of different ways that we can interpret our experiences. So I'm going to show you one more mini model that you can think about as you're starting to build out your stories that kind of ties into narrative arc, but it's slightly different. It's a model that's called a public narrative. And public narrative is the stories that we share when we're trying to like advocate for some type of change, one where, you know, if you ever have the opportunity to like speak in front of like legislators or Congress, or if you have to like, you know, try and promote a cause, or, you know, I know that a lot of you are organizers and activists. So I'm going to share with you one more model. So let me go back to sharing the screen. There we go. Share. I have to bring it to the front again, if I can find it. Okay, you can see my screen? Okay, yeah, great. So public narrative is one of those things that kind of came about really like in the past like 10 years as a thing that is called public narrative. But essentially, there's a professor from Harvard University who started working at the time with Senator Obama before he was a president. And he was invited to the stages of the DNC when in 2004. And so they started seeing that the way that he was actually able to take this moment and then become like the nominee a couple of years later was by sharing this other model, which is called public narrative. And the basic breakdown of it is like he starts off with a story of self, a story of us, and a story of now. So in the case of Obama, the story of self was about him sharing that he was the son of a mother from Kansas and a father from Kenya. And they named him Barack, meaning blessing, and being raised in Hawaii, but only in a place like America would somebody like this little biracial brown boy be able to like actually, you know, achieve greatness and attend some of the best universities in the nation, right? So he kind of starts off with a little bit about himself, but then the story automatically goes into the story of us, and his us in this particular speech were the Democrats, right? So he sees himself as part of a larger community of Democrats. And within that realm, he wanted to be able to say that there are challenges now to the Democrats and to our nation, because as an us, we believe in democracy, we believe in opportunity. And that automatically then leads into the story of now, which is the story of vision. And what was the challenges to that? The challenges, or like if people didn't vote, that our democracy, our us, this idea of like of people like Obama might not be existing anymore. That people of diverse voices, you know, if we're not out there and getting the vote out, that there's a challenge to this democracy. And so we started seeing how kind of combining these three mini narratives, the story about yourself, the story about your us, and the story of now, like what you want people to do, say, believe, change, can all be kind of tied into one speech or into one story. And these kind of stories do have a takeaway. There is a reason why you're sharing them. You want people to do something with these stories. Whereas the first model is more of a model where you don't necessarily have like a call to action per se. It's more so about like what changed in me, what changed in my relationship, or what changed in my worldview. This particular model is a little bit more about, okay, who am I? Who's my posse? Who's my crew, my entourage? And what do I want to do now in order to inspire some type of change or some type of action? Is this making sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. So let me. So I opened up a video that we from. Do you guys know about Aspen New Voices fellows? Have you heard about them? No.
I do.
Okay. Okay. So Emily, you do?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Excellent. Aspen New Voices is a kind of a three-pronged conference that happens most years. I don't think it happened this year, but the first festival is like Aspen Ideas Festival. So if you know about TED or TEDx, it's kind of like what are the ideas? Who are the people out there who have ideas, right? The second aspect of it is Aspen Health. So it's all just like health experts, health policy, health, from around the world. And then there's a third one, Aspen something else. Not important. What is important is that the health conference is one that I've attended for probably at this point the past like 6-7 years. And I wanted to share with you all just a simple 5-minute story about somebody that we worked with that kind of shows how she was able to take this one moment and translate it into something much bigger and beyond her by utilizing these steps. So give me a second to find my other tab. Technology. Okay, no. Let's see where I'm one of those kind of
Dawn.
people who always has about 70 tabs. Always fun to scroll through a billion things.
Anyone has less than 5 tabs, I feel suspicious.
I feel you. Huh. This is interesting. Okay, you know what? Give me a second to pull it back into a different space.
Very good.
Okay, let me X out of that. Let me just find it. Oh, I know what's going on. I think I had it under the same. Let's say, I do. Yep. I had it under the same tabs as the slides. Okay, so now I should be able to see it. There we go. Let's go back to Zoom. Share screen. There we go. Share computer sound. Yes. Sure. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, this is a 5-minute story from one of our participants from the Aspen Ideas Festival. It's 5 minutes, and I just think that it's a good example of a health-related story that kind of like started off as a kernel of an idea that led into a much, a very, in my opinion, a powerful moment of reflection. So here we go.
Gorgeous, gorgeous humans. Okay. Our final speaker of the night is an extraordinary woman, a once professional ballerina, now OBGYN, who you may have heard kill it in the opening session if you were there. She is on a mission to make sure that all women have access to family planning in her country. Please welcome to the stage, Ana Michelle Dubon Estrada.
So, I always wanted to be a doctor. Ever since I remember, I was a little curly girl, and I didn't knew how to talk, and I said, "Quiero ser doctora." That means I want to be a doctor. It was my dream. So one day, I was playing with my dad, who is a surgeon, and I asked him, "Dad, what is the most important part of the body? Because I want to work with that specific part of the body." So he told me, "Everything is important." No. I want to know what's the most important part of the body. I want it to be meaningful. So he told me, "Well, no, Dad, tell me. I want to know what's the part of the body that if you don't have it, you die." So he told me, "Well, the heart." That day, I decided I wanted to be a surgeon of the heart. That day, I decided I wanted to be a doctor that saves the heart. So I went to medical school then. I love it. I was a nerd, and I really loved to study. And when I was doing my practice in OB, I have this magical Disney moment. It was maybe 3 in the morning when I was delivering babies. So I delivered the first one, the second one, the third one. I delivered, I think, 5 babies in 10 minutes or so. Yeah, it was a very busy day. There was an old radio playing very old, beautiful music. And I was just like, this is what I want. The heart is not the more important part of the body. I want to work with another muscle, the uterus. So that day, I decided that I wanted to be an obstetrician. Then I went to a very poor area of my country, Jocotan, Chiquimula. Lots of children dying because there's no food, there's no water. And I was doing my supervised practice. By the way, I wasn't being supervised. I was there alone, looking maybe 80 or 100 patients every day. So one day, I was with my white clothes, feeling a doctor, being a student. So one patient came into the clinic, and I saw her that she was very in fear, very tiny, skinny little girl, maybe 13 years old. "Please, take a seat. What do you need?" And she started crying. "Doctor, I don't know what happened to me, but I have a baby in me." There was this little girl who she doesn't know how the body works and how a baby is in her belly. So I did what I was taught to do. I told her, "I'm sorry, poor little girl. I'm so sorry for you. Here are your vitamins. See you in a month." I did what they told me to do. Next day, I came into the health center, just to find out that she hung herself that same day in a mango tree in her house. Can you imagine what I felt in that moment? I went into the bathroom and started crying and crying because I did what they told me to do. But what can I say? I should say something different. I should say something, and she would be alive. Abortion is not legal in Guatemala, but maybe if I just say something different. Well, then I finished med school. I went to my residency. Of course, 4 years of learning, a lot of science, a lot of technological things, a lot of hysterectomies and cesarean deliveries. And I forgot about this kid. I forgot of the feelings, and I was taught about scientific facts. Nobody told me about counseling, about feelings. Patients were only uterus. They're not people, they're uterus, ovarians, breast. Until when I finished my residency, bam, my big thing. I got pregnant. I was single. Maybe you think, oh, that's not a big deal. Yeah, it was a big deal. Because everybody in my family is a Christian. I was the first pregnant person in my family not being with somebody. I was absolutely alone. I was so desperate. I told my mom I was pregnant when I was 5 months pregnant because I couldn't find the words. In that moment, I understood the desperation. I understood the pain. I understood that little girl 6 years ago who hung herself. I understood every woman that kills herself because she doesn't want to be pregnant. I understand the pain. And I love my kid. Now she's 9. She's such a beautiful, beautiful, lovely kid. I love her with all my heart. But in that moment, you have no idea what that hurts. So I understand that that little child that wanted a meaningful life, now she was finding a purpose. Because I don't want any more women dying because they hang themselves, because they don't want to be pregnant. I think every woman should have the kids that want to have, or not have any kids if they don't want. I understood that a person is more than a brain or a heart or a uterus. The more important part of a person is the soul.
There we go. So that was actually a little bit longer. Yeah, powerful, right? But you kind of see how she kind of took like this moment when we first started working on this story. It was the moment that she had talked to her dad, asking him like, well, what is the most important part of the body, right? It started off as a very simple moment, and there was a lot of meaning that went into it. There was this meaning about like, well, I went on this journey to actually become a surgeon of the heart, which led me to understanding that I actually wanted to work on the uterus, which led me to understand that actually I needed to work on the soul, because people's souls need to be saved just as much as their bodies, right? So, so yeah. So the moments that you all have, the moments that you're actually like, any thoughts or feedback or comments of the video before I bring up this next point. That was deep. Yes, Pedro. I totally agree.
I think it needs to be taught everywhere. It really was powerful, and it was moving, and it also makes sense. We're not like Guatemala. Abortion is still legal as of today.
Mm.
And thank you for inviting me, Jason.
Of course. Right. And in our world, it may not necessarily be.
Awesome. I apologize.
Oh, go ahead, Pedro. Go ahead.
No, I full disclosure, that was deep. when I was, excuse me, hold on, let me turn this down. When I was told about my status, I wasn't. That made me reflect about me. When I was told about my status, I didn't necessarily get upset because I was homeless and had to do what I had to do to live. And I find myself on this side of the quarter. And, you know, when I was told my status, I was like, I'm still living. I had to do something to live.
Yeah.
Sometimes your choices are not clear, but they're a choice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the choices aren't clear, and until they're done with, and you reflect back on it, and you're like, oh, okay, that's what I could have done, or maybe that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't have the opportunity to.
No, but I think the point that the point that I wanted to make is, you know, being a provider, a HIV provider for a long time, and then finding yourself on the other side of the quarter.
Mm-hmm.
It would be disrespectful for me to go in the corner and ball up when I had too much knowledge to
Got
advocate.
it.
So I find myself in a place where I've been a boxer and all I know how to do is fight. So now I gotta fight for the people.
Right. And what you're sharing with us is your why. You have such compelling why based off of your personal experience and your story.
Yes, ma'am.
That's right. And once you start to share that why, you know, and I'm sure you probably have shared it before, because it sounds like you've been doing this work, and you know, you have to have a compelling why to be in the battleground for a long time, you know. But the more that
you know, I'm sorry, before you go, I think sometimes I don't like to bring religion into anything, but sometimes God puts you in a space where you're best talented at, and you don't know that that's your talent.
Yep, absolutely. Until all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is what I should be doing. This is what I'm meant to be doing.
Correct.
It sounds like that's also part of your story and part of your journey, is not knowing that this is what you were meant to be doing.
Well, no, I know He put me here when I asked Him to take my life several times. He gave me life in a different way.
Yes. You got some stories.
That's how I take. Oh, I got a book or two.
We all do. We all do. Oh, I want to hear them. I want to hear these stories. And that's exactly how this stuff works.
Only if you have a lot of towels.
I always have tissues. I always have tissues every single training I go to. Yeah.
Okay.
But you see how, like, even Pedro's response to the story, like, everybody's going to have a different reaction, a different response to the stories, because when one story is being shared, there's a million other stories happening in the world, in our souls, and our spirits, right? That's why they work so well. We connect with people's stories. We connect with these people's experiences. We connect with each other because we start to see ourselves in other people when a story is told really well. So basically, to kind of wrap this up, because I think, are we almost at time?
Yeah,
Almost,
we're at 9:01, but we can wrap up.
Okay, I'll wrap it up. Because, you know, I can just go off on storytelling stuff forever. So let me wrap it up here. So essentially, what I want you to do is, you know, some of you might be writers and, like, you know, have like a journal. Some of you might be like people on Facebook or on social media. But nowadays, there's just so many different ways to capture moments, small moments, big moments, moments that we may have forgotten about, and that suddenly come up to us when we listen to another story. But what I want you to do is to start thinking about how I can insert my story into my work and into my personal life, for whatever reason. You know, it could be a moment that you want to try to engage with somebody new that's coming into your circle, and they might need to know your why. You know, in order to build that trust, you might first need to share that really, you know, that compelling story. Or maybe you're out there trying to advocate, and you need to kind of like look at, okay, what is my personal story? What community are we a part of, you know, and what is that call to action? right? But I want you to kind of think about all the different ways that you can start to incorporate these really powerful, important moments in your life, and utilize them to your best power, your best ability. Yes, your best ability. Because you'll see that you'll be able to change people's hearts, minds, and souls with a story. So so I hope that this is a quick snapshot into what you can do with the power of story, and how to best leverage them as you go forth into the world.
Thank you so much, Don. If people don't mind, I'd like to take just a couple minutes and be able to give, like, maybe Don can answer a couple of questions. Don, would that be okay with you if people have them?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. If people I don't know, maybe people are just thinking a lot about what Don said, but.
Well, Don, this is OC. Listen, I read what Emily, I can't find her on the. I missed the first two questions, but she wrote them to me in chat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was about something that was very memorable that you can't forget that happened in your life.
Yes.
And it changes you. Now, as I was reading, none of the stories that came to my mind included anything that what y'all have been talking about. So I remained silent. But I actually have literally 1 trillion stories, and I'm going to find a way to include them in my social media, which is a group. I don't do personal Facebook. It's too stupid, but I do have my family. Them I love. And I'm going to need you to help me, Jason. I'm going to need you to help me because you're just so much better than I am.
No.
I will say this, though, concerning, and you have to pardon my ignorance, concerning LGBTQ, I was raised in Georgia, right, in South of Georgia. And as I recall it, the worst thing that a person could be was gay and black. That's how I was raised. And was I homophobic? I think so. But that changed around the time I was 16, when one of my better friends was gay. And then he was still a fan after I understood he was gay. And that's where it began. Am I totally healed now, Jason? I suspect not, right? But I'm a lot better than I was before. And I think that I want everyone to just, if they can't accept, to tolerate. That's better than nothing. It's a good beginning, right? And I'm gonna start with my family. There's a bunch of us. And even if they don't agree with me right away, they heard what I said. It'll get into their subconscious. So the next time I'll have more to say. And Jason, you still gonna help me. So
Thanks, Aussie.
Jason is my cousin, by the way. So everybody.
Oh, no way.
Proud of it. Proud of it.
Thank you.
Really quick. Thank you, Aussie. Really quick, I want to just answer the one question we have in the chat, if that's possible. Thanks. Niv says, when your incident is something that happened to someone else or involved other people, how do you prevent it from feeling exploitative? Or relatedly, how do you effectively acknowledge your privilege when telling these stories?
Great question. So there's a little bit of a challenge when you're telling about a moment that's happened to somebody else, because obviously it didn't necessarily directly happen to you. And you know, when I was talking, wait, hold on just 1 second. Okay, there we go. Okay, cool. Little arms are broken around here. But you know that moment when I was talking about the different ways of interpreting things, how, you know, somebody's interpretation of something now might be good, but the interpretation of it might be later. The interpretation later might be different. Mm-hmm. What's important when you're sharing like another person's story or another person's experience is still kind of keep it centered on you. To still keep it centered on you, because somebody may have gone through something traumatic and their perception of that moment may change also during time. So instead of saying like, you know, like this happened to my cousin and it was the worst thing ever that could have ever happened to him, right? that may or may not be true as things change and things evolve. So what you want to do is you want to keep your analysis of this moment as a reflection on yourself. So in other words, this is what happened to my cousin. It made me realize that I was that I might be in danger, or that I might need to be doing something more in the world, because if this is happening to people that I love, then what else is going on, right? So whereas there's a tendency a lot of times for us to use case studies, right? And especially nonprofits, it's like, this is a case study of somebody who's done wonderful in the world, and that's a different form of communication. And it also is it's a different kind of a story. It serves a different purpose. It serves a purpose of showing or proof. But the stories that we're talking about now are stories of engagement with us, and a reflection of who we are and what we've learned and understood. So the best thing that I can recommend is so that it doesn't feel exploitative, is just put it back on you, to make sure that you are kind of telling the moment, your understanding of the moment from your personal standpoint.
Are you saying use case studies, but make it from your own personal standpoint? I'm not sure I don't know how to do that. What do you mean?
Yeah, so yeah, it's no problem at all. So essentially, you say, for example, you were just talking with Jason, right? You were mentioning how Jason is your cousin?
Yes.
All right. So Jason, for example, shared something about his past earlier in this session, right? Your interpretation of that is your current interpretation. So if you were to share a story about oh, I was on this webinar and I learned something about my cousin, and I'm sorry?
Not before talking with Jason, I would. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay, this is an example, so you could share I once Jason shared his story, I realized that I need to go back to my family in Georgia and talk to them, because a lot of them are homophobic, right? That would be your interpretation of it, as opposed to saying I was on the call with Jason, and Jason is the kind of person who really needs your support, because he went through all this kind of other stuff, and he needs support from the community, because he shouldn't have to deal with homophobia in his life, right? You're putting it all back on him, as opposed to focusing the narrative on you and your interpretation.
I understand.
So it's just it's a slight nuance, but it when we're thinking about these kind of stories, we want to focus on what it means to us, not what it means to the other people.
Okay, and with that, I'm gonna wrap us up for tonight. Thank you so much, Dawn, for sharing all of your knowledge with us and walking us through this training. Very, very grateful for you.
Of course. I'm glad to be of help. And if people want more information, they can, find me on my website, dawnjfraser.com. Always I'm actually currently working with a lot of people who are interested in speaking at TED or TEDx in 2021, because I know that there's a lot of people out there who have been really in action in the past couple of months, years, around health, around race, around equality. So I'm actually putting together a brand new program, because I spoke at TED at New York City a few years ago. So I'm trying to teach people how to do the same. So if anybody's interested in anything like that, or storytelling in general, just hit me up and I'll be more than happy to fill you in.
And I'll put Dawn's contact info too, with the training series recording at the website that I shared in the link, or in the chat. And a reminder that our last training in the series will be this coming Tuesday, and it will be about using social media for activism, how to use your personal platform to elevate issues and calls to action that you care about, and how to do it effectively.
That would be useful.
Yeah. I need that training too.
Same.
I thought I was on. Sorry.
Okay, thank you again, Dawn, so much, and thank you everyone for taking your time to join tonight, and we will see you on Tuesday.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Take
Thank
care.
you. you.
Your
Bye.
phone,
Love. Night all.
I need your phone number, Jason.
Okay, I'll
Text it to me.
yes. Well, I need yours to text me, but I'll send it to you on Facebook. All right.
Peace.
Peace.
We be